Why did the corporate inspector go silent the moment he saw a 280-pound ironworker step off the scaffolding? He thought he was just doing his job, cleaning up unprofessional workers on site. He saw an old man with taped-up hands eating cheap homemade food and assumed he was expendable. What he did unknow was that this old man had built half of Dallas with his bare hands. And the foreman walking toward him. That foreman owed him everything. But before we get to the reckoning, we have to understand the disrespect that made it necessary. The Dallas sun was merciless that July afternoon, 98 degrees of pure Texas heat beating down on the construction site like a hammer on an anvil. Dust hung in the air, mixing with the smell of hot asphalt and diesel fuel. The skeletal frame of what would become a new office tower stretched toward the cloudless sky, steel beams gleaming like bones in the afternoon light. Miguel Ortega sat on a stack of concrete blocks in the shade of a partially built wall, his weathered hands carefully opening a plastic container his wife had packed that morning. Rice, beans, and chicken, simple food that tasted like love. At 56, his body carried the story of 3 decades on construction sites. The gray hair beneath his dust-covered hard hat, the medical tape wrapped around his knuckles to protect joints that didn't bend like they used to, the deep lines around his eyes from squinting into 1,000 sunrises. He wasn't just eating lunch, he was studying a safety manual, the same way he always did, making notes in the margins with a pencil stub. Above him, the rhythmic clang of hammers on steel. Around him, the low voices of younger workers on their break, laughing and checking their phones. Miguel was quiet, as he always was. He let his work speak for him. But today, someone was about to speak for him in a very different way. Excuse me. Excuse me. The voice cut through the construction noise like a knife through paper sharp, entitled, Irritated. Miguel looked up to see a man who clearly didn't belong. Preston Blake was maybe 38, with designer sunglasses that probably cost more than Miguel's weekly paycheck, a polo shirt so white it seemed to glow, and a clipboard held like a weapon. His shoes were clean. That told Miguel everything. Yes, sir. Miguel set down his container, wiping his hands on his jeans. Are you aware this is a professional work site? Preston's voice dripped with condescension, because right now it looks like a homeless shelter. Those rags you're wearing, that. Food. He gestured at Miguel's lunch with barely concealed disgust. This is a corporate project. We have image standards. Miguel felt the familiar weight in his chest, the same feeling he'd carried for decades. Being invisible, being dismissed. I'm on my lunch break, sir. I don't care what you're on. You look unprofessional. And frankly, I'm questioning who let you on this site in the first place. Preston tapped his clipboard. Badge number. Now, the younger workers had stopped talking. A circle of silence was forming. Miguel slowly reached for his badge, hands steady despite the humiliation burning in his throat. 30 years of showing up before dawn, of teaching young workers how to read blueprints, how to tie knots that would hold a man's life, how to respect the steel. And now this Miguel Ortega, Preston read, barely glancing at the badge. Well, Miguel, I'm going to recommend your site. Access be revoked. We need workers who understand professionalism, not. He waved vaguely at Miguel's taped hands, his simple lunch, his weathered face, whatever this is. What Preston didn't see was the shadow falling across the concrete. He didn't hear the boots hitting the ground 30 feet away. He didn't notice the sudden tension in every worker's spine. Eso Huld Abe. Miguel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What could he say? He'd heard it all before. Too old, too slow, too brown, too poor. He'd survived by keeping his head down and letting his welding torch do the talking. But God, it hurt. Even after all these years, it hurt. Around them, workers exchanged glances. A few pulled out phones. Someone muttered something in Spanish, a prayer or a curse. Hard to tell. The temperature seemed to rise another 10 degrees, or maybe that was just the rage simmering beneath the surface of every calloused hand on that site. If your heart breaks for this kind of everyday injustice, please hit the like button and subscribe to support stories that matter. Real respect doesn't come from a clipboard, comes from sweat and steel. Preston was still talking. Something about hiring standards and visual professionalism, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his career. "You done?" The voice was deeper than thunder, rougher than gravel, and absolutely unavoidable. Preston spun around and found himself staring at a wall of muscle and tattoos. Big Jake Harrison stood 6'4" in his boots, with shoulders that looked like they could carry IBMs for fun. His forearms were covered in tribal ink and decades-old scars. His hot was decorated with Union stickers that told stories of battles won and bridges built, and his eyes, cold blue, locked on Preston like targeting lasers promised consequences. I'm sorry. Who are you?" Preston tried to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked slightly. "Foreman, been running crews for 28 years. Jake stepped closer, casually rolling up his sleeves to reveal even more scar tissue and muscle. "Which means I know every inspector in Dallas. Never seen you before? So let me ask again, you done disrespecting my guys. I'm from corporate. I have authority too. You have authority to read that badge you're holding." Jake pointed at Miguel's ID, still in Preston's manicured fingers. "Read it again. The whole thing." Preston's eyes dropped. His face went pale. "Miguel Ortega, Union Certified Master Welder. Site Safety Coordinator, Senior Instructor." Jake's voice got quieter, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You know what that means? Corporate? That means the man you just tried to throw off site is the reason half these workers know which end of a torch to hold, including me. He taught me when I was 22 years old and stupid." The silence was deafening. Jake moved to stand beside Miguel, who remained seated, calm, dignified. "Miguel's got more professionalism in his taped-up pinky finger than you'll have in your entire life. Those rags he's wearing, they're called work clothes. That food you mocked, that's what real people eat, people who don't waste money trying to impress strangers." Preston backed up a step. I didn't know. You didn't ask." Jake pulled out his phone. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna apologize to Miguel. Then you're gonna now walk to that site trailer and explain to the project manager why you just insulted a 30-year Union veteran. And then," Jake's smile was absolutely devoid of warmth, "you gonna pray they do UNT file a complaint that gets you blacklisted from every job site in Texas." Miguel, I apologize. I was out of line." Miguel finally stood, brushing dust from his jeans. "You're gonna apologize to Miguel." He looked tired. "Apology accepted. But son, let me teach you something before you go. Never judge a worker by his hands. Smooth hands just mean he hasn't built anything worth remembering yet." Preston practically ran to the trailer. The workers erupted in applause and whistles. Jake clapped Miguel on the shoulder gently, because he knew those shoulders had been carrying weight for decades. "Lunch tomorrow. My treat." Miguel smiled for the first time all day. "Only if you're buying your treat means McDonald's." "Damn right it does. Real respect isn't about looking the part. It's about being the part day after day, year after year, until your hands tell the story your mouth doesn't need to." Miguel didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His work had already spoken. Sometimes the quietest person on the job site has the loudest legacy and the strongest backup. So here's my question for you. Where are you watching from today? And more importantly, what would you have done if you'd seen that inspector disrespecting Miguel? Would you have stepped in, or would you have stayed silent? Drop your answer in the comments, because I genuinely want to know. If this story hit you in the chest, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life justice, because respect isn't given, it's earned, one shift at a time.